Let's start with China. You focus a lot on China and the growth of AI there, vis-a-vis what's happening here. We learned this week that some H200 chips have been sent to China, a small amount according to the Commerce Department. How big a deal is that when you look at sort of the way that our country is interacting with China when it comes to AI?
Yeah, thanks for being here with us. I'm so happy to be sitting here in this beautiful place.
Beautiful.
We're about to kick off the conference, and yeah, China's going to be front and center. And the technology race with China, we're really at an inflection point right now. And it's no longer just about chips, because the Chinese open source models are so close to our most advanced frontier models, like what just came out, GLM 5.2, you all heard about DeepSeek, all of those things, especially in the cyber area. They're nearly as good as Mythos and some of our best ones. So we're getting into an era where you're about to see extreme cyber warfare enabled by AI. Deeply worrying.
Conventional wisdom here has been that China has been behind us because they haven't had access to these technology, the kind of infrastructure that we have. Is that misplaced? Is that faith in that misplaced?
No, it's not misplaced. And I do think the Biden administration was exactly right to have export controls on the most advanced chips and the semiconductor manufacturing equipment. But you can only hobble your opponent for so long. You got to run faster. And so that's the race we're now on. They're basically caught up. And I would say I have to give the Trump administration some real credit. Just in the last couple of weeks, you've heard a lot of quiet conversations behind the scenes in Washington, within the administration and with advisors outside, thinking about how do you test these models? How do you make sure they're safe from a national security perspective before you put them out there? And I think a corollary to that is they also are going to probably want to test the Chinese models and tell American and Western companies, is this safe to use or not?
I think back on when we became aware of DeepSeek and the amount of surprise that was associated with that. Now, many months since then, do we have a more comprehensive, a better sense of sort of what China has been doing and is doing?
Yes.
And what's led to that? What gives us the confidence that we know sort of where they are in
Well,
their development?
I mean, our technologists, I live in Silicon Valley,
Yes.
so you can't say a sentence without saying AI.
It's required.
Yeah,
Yes.
Exactly. You can't look down the street without seeing a Waymo. But so our scientists are often, and the people in the firms, know what their competitors in China are doing. They just make it a point, just like the Chinese know what we're doing. There are some scientists that go back and forth, far fewer than you would think anymore. But of course, you're in a business of knowing what your competitors are up to.
How would you characterize the U.S.'s level of engagement with China and with all that's happening with AI in China? I think back on the first Trump administration, there was such a focus on competition with China. There was a more hawkish stance, I think, than we have now. Has that changed? Are we talking about China enough, do you think?
Yeah, I do think that some of the serious China hawks that worked in the first Trump administration aren't in this time. And so you have more disparate voices giving advice on China here. And the president obviously wanted to have a good meeting with Xi Jinping. Things were quiet. Behind the scenes, under the surface, the competition is on. The competition is on in the Indo-Pacific, as we'll also hear this week. It's on in technology. It's on in all sorts of areas. But I think on the top, people are hoping to pretend it's smooth sailing.
Moving from Beijing to Washington, how would you assess Washington's interest in regulating this space? Sounds like you feel like there's more seriousness being devoted to that
There is.
now. What does that look like? What does that look like kind of in concert with industry?
Yeah. So the contours are not yet known, but the Biden administration and actually the UK government did a really good start on this. They created these small AI safety institutes, deeply nerdy institutions that had scientists that were testing for national security threats. Can these AI models build bioweapons, chemical weapons? Can they be used in cyber? Those have been stood down, but there's now some conversation about having the national labs test these models. I think that's a really good model because it's what our national labs do. They test technology for the American government. So it doesn't matter so much who does it and how. It matters that we're doing it at all.
There will be conversations this week here centering on the use of AI in the context of national security. How are you feeling just about the way in which that's been deployed thus far and how folks are thinking through sort of the policy implications of having AI driving advanced weaponry? Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
I know that the Pentagon is thinking about this very carefully. And I think there are some really good people from the tech world who are now in the Department of War. So that part is good. look, we're all learning, and we're all learning super quickly. You have the Belgian defense minister here. You have actually a number of defense ministers from Europe and beyond. And all of the informal conversations I've had so far has been around this. What do we do about drones? What do we do about counter drones? How do you take them down without having a whole lot of debris? How do you jam? Can you build new surface ships, or are they just sitting ducks to see drones? So none of it's final yet, because we're at such a strange hinge point in history. But I've been really encouraged by the number and the sophistication of the conversations that are happening.
So this brings us to the Middle East, and we've seen the U.S. kind of wage war, make strikes with kind of traditional weapons. But I'm curious of how you see all of this playing out. All of the back and forth surrounding the Strait of Hormuz, but yes, sort of the lessons learned thus far from the conflict that we've seen. Yeah,
turns out that mines and drones are pretty effective, because I used to be a shipping company director, you're not going to send anything through the Straits of Hormuz if there's any chance that it's going to be hit. Your insurance rates are sky high, and you're just not going to take the chance. So the United States and our friends and allies have to get it ready right 100% of the time. The strait has to be 100% open. And Iran only has to get a couple ships. And so that is what's making this incredibly difficult. And I think if you and I had chatted 2 months ago, I don't think anyone would have predicted that, A, this blockade and the closing of the straits would be going on so long, and B, how much the world has managed to muddle through, for lack of a better word. Like, we haven't shut down the world economy, even though this has been very, very difficult.
I've seen this analogy of kind of Schrodinger's box to Schrodinger's strait, that you wouldn't take a ship through if you thought there's any indication or any chance that there could be mines there. What will it take in practical terms to give somebody who is running a shipping company, say, or a captain, the confidence to navigate that strait in the way that he might have before?
You need to be 99% sure that there are no mines in your path, and 99% sure that no drones or missiles are going to hit your deck. And we are not in a position yet to do that.
Let me ask you lastly just sort of where we go from here. So initially President Trump floated this 20% tariff the U.S. might place on ships to kind of help them navigate the strait going forward and protect it. Now that's become kind of an investment deal, perhaps with Middle Eastern nations. I'm just curious sort of what you think the region is looking for and how transformative this moment has been for Middle Eastern allies of the U.S.
Oh my gosh. Well, you should ask them. Some of them will be here. But it's hugely transformative. I think the quiet behind the scenes working together of the Israeli military with the Emiratis, for example, the fact that the split between Saudi and the Emirates became so apparent, how difficult it has been to defeat Iran. We're seeing the architecture of a totally new Middle East, and I think we're nowhere near done seeing it. I think there's one encouraging, I'm going to leave us with a silver lining, which is really hard to do in the Middle East. But there is this moment where the Lebanese government actually could stand up and try to kick out Hezbollah. And I think part of the difficulty, really the poison pill that unraveled the MOU, as you know, that Israel wasn't willing to give up the fight in southern Lebanon because they were not willing to be hit by Hezbollah. So you could imagine a positive future where the Lebanese government gets stronger, they put down Hezbollah, you have a better northern neighbor for Israel, and you start building stability from that side. But let's hope we get there.
We'll leave it on that optimistic note. Anja, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Great to be with you.